Came by to see you a little earlier, but you went home. See, I ain't the enemy, young blood. I don't want no trouble.
I was from the hood, so I had a different edge about me, and it was scary.
When we speak of actors who played it raw and aggressive on screen, you definitely cannot miss a name: Clifton Powell. But here's the thing, besides those crazy roles, there's another side of him that is more dangerous than you can ever imagine.
A guy came to my page the other day and said, I don't watch shit. Clifton Powell does. All he does is play and
From the alleged case in 2011.
It's been the worst time of my life, Joe. Somebody accused me of them.
To getting caught up in the whole darkness of Hollywood.
I was out of my house maybe 80% of the time. And no marriage can survive if you're not giving it attention. And then there's all the other temptations on the road, the women, the gambling.
And even supposedly losing his temper on set on many occasions. There's so much more to Powell than you know. Let's dive in. Clifton Powell might not be a name you know right away, but his face is hard to forget. For over 30 years, he's been in film after film, earning a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable actors. His big break came in 1993 with Menace II Society, where his raw performance stood out.
All right. Be here tomorrow night about 10:30.
Soon after, he became a fan favorite in the Friday movies, showing his sharp comedy skills. Powell's range made him stand out. He could move from heavy dramas to light comedies with ease.
Come on. Little mother gonna try to rob me.
By 2004, Powell had already locked in his place in Hollywood when he appeared in the hit biopic Ray with Jamie Foxx. His performance was so strong, it earned him an NAACP Image Award nomination, putting him right up there with some of Hollywood's most respected actors. Along the way, he showed up in films like Dead Presidents, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Rush Hour, and Next Friday. And every single time, he left a lasting impression that stuck with audiences long after the credits rolled. Over the years, Powell stacked up more than 100 film and TV credits, becoming the go-to guy when Hollywood needed someone unforgettable, whether it was a villain, a father figure, a hustler, or even a cop. What made him stand out wasn't just how much work he did, but how versatile he was. He could terrify you with just a glare, make you laugh with perfect timing, or bring quiet emotional weight to a dramatic scene. That range earned him respect from directors, casting agents, and audiences alike, building a career most actors could only dream of.
I think I've grown as an actor. I think I'm respected for the work that I've done.
100%.
But I don't buy into that.
But despite all the professional success, Powell's personal and professional journey was far from smooth. How could someone who worked so hard to rise from obscurity to recognition, surviving the tough streets of Southeast Washington, D.C., and turning his life into a Hollywood story, now find himself at the center of a breaking news headline that feels like the end of the road? The gap between his success and his struggles has rarely been so wide. On one hand, Powell was everywhere. Blockbusters, cult classics, you name it. On the other hand, his off-screen issues and controversies were piling up, creating a whole other story that was nowhere near as glamorous as red carpets and flashing cameras. Hollywood's seen plenty of scandals before, but this one makes you wonder. Once the industry and the public make up their minds, can a man ever really bounce back? Uncovered details confirm that Clifton Powell's long legal battle, which began more than a decade ago, has finally been settled, with no criminal charges upheld. For years, people only whispered about the story, but now the full picture is finally clear. A man once known for his powerful presence in over 100 movies was brought to his knees. And the most troubling part is how much damage had already been done, long before the courts made their decision. How does an allegation with no proven foundation nearly destroy the career of a man who worked so hard to build his life? And even more importantly, what does this say about the power of public opinion in the entertainment world? The ordeal started in late summer of 2011, when a woman under the pseudonym Keontae Myers came forward with shocking claims against Powell. She alleged that an encounter in a New Orleans hotel room began consensually, but in her words became too aggressive to continue. According to her, when she told him to stop, he ignored her request and carried on anyway. At the time, Myers was working as a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino. She filed a complaint that quickly made its way to the press. Outlets like TMZ jumped on the story, running blunt headlines that left little room for nuance. For Powell, the sudden shift was devastating. Overnight, the actor who had made people laugh in Friday and moved them in Ray was being cast in an entirely different light, with his name tied to one of the most serious accusations a man can face. From the start, Powell flat out denied the claims. Through his representative, he released a statement saying the accusations were false and that he would pursue every legal option against the woman who made them. But once allegations like this hit the public, the damage begins instantly. Even though the original criminal investigation was dropped due to lack of evidence, the headlines didn't just disappear. Myers later took it further by filing a civil case against Powell, demanding more than $75,000 in damages. That meant that even without a criminal conviction, Powell was locked into a legal fight that dragged on for years, forcing him to defend not just his freedom, but also his reputation. The civil case took over his life, draining time, money, and emotional energy.
It's been the worst time of my life, Joe. If somebody accused me of them.
And unlike criminal court, where the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, civil court only requires what's called a preponderance of evidence. In other words, the jury doesn't have to be almost certain, just convinced it's more likely than not that the claim is true. For celebrities, that standard creates an especially dangerous situation, because sometimes the suggestion alone is enough to stain a career, no matter what the final verdict says. Powell understood this all too well. In later interviews, he said the worst part wasn't even the legal process. It was losing trust, losing work, and realizing that so many people had already made up their minds. Hollywood isn't known for loyalty or patience when scandal hits. The industry, worth billions, runs on reputation and image, and studios are quick to cut ties with anyone whose name gets tied to controversy. For Powell, the fallout was immediate. Roles he had already locked in started slipping away. Producers pulled back, worried about bad press. TV appearances that once would have been easy for him were suddenly canceled after just a few episodes.
I feel like some jobs just went away. Some jobs, I was working one show, which I can't name. I thought I was going to be there about 7 or 8 episodes. After the second episode, it went away.
He even remembered one show in particular where he was supposed to appear in 7 or 8 episodes. By the second, his character was gone, with no explanation other than the cloud of allegations hanging over him. The emotional hit hurt more than the financial losses. Powell called that period the most painful time in his life since losing his father decades earlier. And as a father himself, the accusations cut even deeper, not just because of what they implied, but because of how his own kids might see him under the weight of those headlines.
My attorneys supported me through this whole ordeal. It's been the most emotional ordeal I've ever been through since my father died in the 80s.
He never stopped claiming his innocence, but he couldn't shield his family from the whispers, the rumors, and the doubts that followed everywhere. On the street, he saw suspicion in strangers' eyes. Online, anonymous comments branded him guilty before a court ever looked at the evidence. In a business where perception often means more than facts, Powell had already been sentenced by the court of public opinion. The civil case dragged on for 4 long years. During that time, Powell lived under its shadow, trying to hold on to his career and personal life, while lawyers and judges debated the details. In 2017, the case was finally tossed out because there wasn't enough evidence to support the claims. By 2018, his own counterclaims for defamation and emotional distress were dismissed too, bringing the whole ordeal to an end. But even in victory, Powell faced a harsh reality. While the courts cleared him, Hollywood never did. That was the real tragedy. He was never found guilty of a crime, yet the punishment stuck a ruined reputation. In an industry where perception can outweigh truth, the accusation itself became the sentence. The facts say Clifton Powell was never convicted of anything. But when you look at his career, the damage is obvious. He lost roles, trust, and the steady momentum that had once made him one of Hollywood's most reliable performers. The case dragged on long enough to steal critical years from his working life. Years he could never get back. The dismissal should have set him free, but instead, it left behind a scar that never really faded.
I've lost work because of it. You know, my reputation has been basically ruined, and I have to go about the business of trying to fix my reputation.
Clifton Powell's career wasn't just shaped by the personal troubles that dragged him into courtrooms and tabloids. It was also shaped by the bigger, systemic barriers that have been part of Hollywood for generations. Powell has spoken openly about how casting decisions were often influenced not by his skill or professionalism, but by the shade of his skin. He remembered times when producers or network executives dismissed him outright, telling him he was too dark for the role, or, in one particularly painful moment, that he was so dark he might scare everyone. Hearing rejections like that over and over left him questioning whether all his training and his proven track record even mattered when the first thing people saw was his complexion.
I heard that she was up for a big role in a big TV movie, but you didn't get the role because of your skin tone? The Rudy Bridges story?
Well, basically what happened was the producers told the director that I was so dark that it looked like I would scare everyone, so they wouldn't hire me.
I lost the role because the network, which I won't name, said that they thought I was too dark and would scare everybody.
Hollywood has long worked on the idea that marketability equals relatability, and relatability is often judged by how close an actor fits Eurocentric beauty standards. In reality, that meant darker-skinned actors were often shut out of leading roles, especially in love stories, or in roles where the audience was expected to sympathize with the character. Powell's talent was never in question, but those industry preferences put him at a disadvantage no amount of hard work could erase.
I don't give a what I said. I don't get out of bed for 2:30. Don't come through this.
What made it worse was the contradiction. Powell was often praised for being able to play gritty, intimidating, or menacing characters. But when it came to casting roles that required charm, sensitivity, or vulnerability, suddenly his skin tone was seen as a problem. That double standard limited how far he could grow, boxing him into certain archetypes and keeping him from roles that could have shown a different side of his ability. It also fed into the way people viewed him during his legal troubles, because audiences were already used to seeing him in roles that leaned into the darker side of human behavior. His frustrations didn't end with Hollywood's casting practices. Within the Black entertainment community itself, he noticed a harmful trend of tearing each other down in public, especially in mainstream outlets that already downplayed Black artistry. One example was his clash with director Spike Lee, after Lee made comments Powell thought were unfair toward another Black actor. Powell spoke out, saying he didn't respect anyone, including himself, his son, or his daughter, who would go to crossover press and publicly tear down a fellow Black entertainer trying to succeed.
I am not going to comment about Spike Lee. I said what I said, and I stand by what I said. Go read about it. And a lot of y'all don't have the facts. I don't dislike Spike Lee. I dislike some of his business practices. I'm never going to accept a Black man doing to us what the man has been doing for the last 70,000 years. And so go do your research.
Anyone, including myself, even my son or my daughter, that goes to the crossover press.
That reaction showed his belief in solidarity, even in an industry where competition was fierce and opportunities were limited. For him, criticizing each other only made the systemic barriers worse. This stance was part of what made his NAACP Image Award nomination for Ray so important. It wasn't just about recognition for one role, it was about proving his work had value beyond Hollywood's biases. In Ray, Powell played Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager to Ray Charles, and his layered performance stood alongside Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning role as the music legend. The nomination showed that his contribution couldn't be ignored, even in an environment that often overlooked actors like him. That nomination was a rare moment where the system acknowledged his worth without attaching conditions or dismissing him based on appearance. But the truth remained. Opportunities for darker-skinned actors were fewer, and Powell's career carried the marks of that discrimination. Clifton Powell's rise in Hollywood is often remembered through the characters he brought to life on screen. But the truth is, the man behind those roles was shaped by a childhood that forced him to grow up way faster than most kids. Born on March 16, 1956, and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., Powell came of age in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city, a place where crime, poverty, and limited opportunity defined the lives of many young men.
I grew up in Washington, D.C., Southeast D.C., as a matter of fact. Tough area in D.C.
For kids growing up there, making it out wasn't guaranteed. It was a daily fight just to stay on the right path. Life hit Powell hard early on. When he was only 4 years old, his mother passed away, and that left him in the care of his father, who struggled with alcoholism and couldn't provide the kind of stability a child needs. By the time Clifton was 7, he was basically raising himself. He didn't have a babysitter, didn't have anyone to guide him day to day, and had to figure out how to fend for himself in a neighborhood where trouble was always close by.
My mother died pretty tragically when I was 4, and my dad was what I would call a dysfunctional alcoholic. I was raising myself at 7.
It would have been easy for his story to go the wrong way, like so many kids around him who ended up behind bars or worse. But Clifton was fortunate to have a few key people step into his life at the right time. One of them was Daryl Harvey, the son of a woman named Amagine Johnson, who Clifton's dad had met. When Clifton was just 8 years old, Daryl, who was about 17, took him under his wing. For a boy whose father wasn't always present, having someone older to look up to was huge. Daryl became a role model, the kind of big brother figure who made sure Clifton didn't get lost in the streets.
My dad met a lady named Imogene Johnson, God rest her soul. She had a son named Daryl Harvey, who basically took me under his wing, probably 17 and I was 8. And he just took care of me, you know?
That kind of mentorship was a lifeline. It gave him hope and focus when everything else around him felt unstable. Clifton also leaned on his sister, who helped him escape the harshness of his neighborhood whenever she could. On weekends, she would take him away from Southeast DC and into a calmer, safer environment.
My sister, God rest her soul, I spent the weekends at her house to get me out of the hood, you know, to kind of expose me to another, I would say another environment.
Those moments away from the streets gave him a glimpse of a different life, one that felt more stable, more nurturing, and more full of possibility. For a kid like him, those small breaks made all the difference, helping shape the man he would one day become. Looking back, Powell often described those years as a non-stop fight to stay out of trouble. He grew up surrounded by friends and peers who slipped into dangerous paths, ending up in jail cells or funerals. For him, survival wasn't just about strength, it was about leaning on the right mentors, family members, and even faith. Powell credits the church as a major anchor in his life. "I was in church every Sunday," he once said. "That's why I'm here today. If I hadn't gotten out of the hood, I'd probably be locked up somewhere."
I was in church, you know, every Sunday, and so they kept me out of trouble. I think that's why I'm sitting here, because if I hadn't got out of the hood, I probably wouldn't be sitting right here. I'd probably be locked up somewhere for real.
Those words show just how much the combination of faith, family, and discipline kept him from being swallowed by the streets. But even though he made it out, the scars of loss and instability never fully went away. Like many people who grew up in broken homes, Powell longed to create stability for himself as an adult. He tried to build that through family. He married Kimberly Powell, and together they built what, on the surface, looked like a solid, stable home. For a while, it seemed like he had found the balance he missed as a child. But Hollywood's demands quickly tested the marriage. Constant travel, long days on set, and the temptations that came with fame strained the relationship in ways that eventually became too much to handle.
I think the biggest mistake I made in the beginning was getting married. Not so much because marriage is bad, but trying to build my career inside of my marriage. The trajectory in the arts has its own isolated energy, and it takes all of your time and all of your energy. You barely have enough time for your wife and your kids.
When the marriage collapsed, It left Powell devastated. The divorce hit him hard, not just emotionally, but financially as well. Powell himself admitted that he lost around $10 million in the process.
Man, you lost $10 million in your divorce, bro?
Yeah, well, you know.
My divorce, and they don't tell you the divorce rate in Hollywood is 90 to 95%. So my divorce cost me about $10 million. So had I made that move.
For a man who had worked tirelessly for decades to carve out financial security in such a cutthroat business, the loss was enormous. It stripped him of the savings he had built and forced him to start over at a point in life when most of his peers were settling into retirement. The blow was crushing, but it was another chapter in a life where rebuilding had always been part of the story. Powell has never shied away from being real about the mistakes he made during this time in his life. He openly admitted that his dedication to work and the temptations that came with fame pulled him away from his responsibilities at home, especially with his children. "I wasn't there for my children like I should have been," he said, and that one line shows how much regret and self-awareness he carries. He explained that while he was able to provide financially, money wasn't the same as being present. His absence, both physically and emotionally, left a hole that no amount of gifts could fill. He reflected on it with honesty, saying that if he had been gone half the time, maybe it would have been okay. But being gone 70% of the time was simply too much, and it took a heavy toll on his family. This realization, unfortunately, came too late to save his marriage or undo the strain that had already built up at home. It shows the emotional price he paid for chasing success under the constant pressure of Hollywood. On top of that, Powell also found himself caught in some of the traps that the entertainment world sets for many actors. He admitted to gambling a lot, spending anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year in casinos.
I was out of my house maybe 80% of the time. And no marriage can survive if you're not giving it attention. And then there's all the other temptations on the road, the women, the gambling, partying, and before you know it, you're in divorce court.
While some might see that as small change for a celebrity, the truth is, it added up quickly and only made his financial situation worse, especially after the divorce had already shaken his stability. There was also the issue of people, women, and fake friends who didn't really care about him, only about what he could do for them. Being surrounded by that kind of crowd pushed him deeper into a lifestyle of reckless spending, short-lived relationships, and empty friendships. It all created a sense of imbalance that left him exposed, and as time went on, he admitted that he felt like he was spiraling. The things that seemed exciting in the moment only ended up dragging him further down in the long run. This contrast in Powell's life kept growing more obvious. On the outside, he was a successful actor, showing up on screens in movies and TV shows that people all over the world watched. To fans, he looked strong, confident, and larger than life. But behind that image was a man struggling to keep his family together, wrestling with huge financial losses and trying to live with the fallout of his own choices. The shiny picture of success hid a reality that was fragile and unstable. And this gap between perception and reality made him especially vulnerable when the accusations in 2011 came crashing down on him.